The 5 Series has been a hugely important car for BMW, and in fact since 1972 more than 10 million examples have been produced, which goes to show just how popular it has been. Now, it has enabled that popularity through a little bit of innovation and a little bit of adapting to the times. And you could argue that this is going to be one of its biggest changes today. It's the creation of the new electric 5 Series, the i5. Now, as you might have guessed, we're checking it out in prototype form, and we're getting underneath the skin of this new i5 ahead of its full release later this year. And we've been able to drive it. We're going to have a little look around to see just what it might offer when it heads onto the UK's roads. So I am under strict instructions not to show you absolutely everything inside this car, but I thought it might be interesting for you to find out what it feels like driving inside one of these prototype vehicles. As you can see, pretty much everything is covered over. This is to disguise what might be underneath and stop me from fully knowing what this car might offer later in the year. What I can tell you is that it's going to have a whole load of technology inside, and it's going to have the latest operating system 8.5 that BMW has to offer, relayed via a curved display that we've seen in a number of the latest BMW models. We're also going to continue to get a rotary controller dial for the infotainment, which works in conjunction with the touchscreen, so you can use both touchscreen display and the rotary dial. And BMW has also worked to clean up the overall interface of the steering wheel, so there are fewer buttons there, makes it feel a little bit more intuitive and less like you're having to delve through loads of different buttons and systems. But yeah, it feels a little bit like you're driving inside a slightly leather-clad Batmobile, but it is quite exciting, and I also quite like this steering wheel, which has a nice flat bottom to it. So what are the headline facts and figures that we're going to be talking about with this new i5? Well, the version that I'm in now, the eDrive 40, is going to be the most efficient version, and you're going to get actually around about 335 brake horsepower, which isn't bad at all considering usual 5 Series outputs. And in this version, you're going to be sending power to the rear wheels alone in typical BMW fashion, though you will also be able to get the i5 with xDrive 4-wheel drive for a little extra traction when things get slippery. In terms of outright range, BMW quotes a top-end figure of 361 miles, which is slightly less than you'll get from the EQE Mercedes, but it's more than good enough for long-distance trips. You'll also, again, being a prototype, I haven't had fully confirmed figures, but it'll be able to charge at over 195 kilowatt, which means that you will be able to rapid charge this car and get those top-ups done in a quick time. Now, as with any prototype car, you do leave a little bit of margin, but I've been told that these cars dynamically are very close to what will be in the production version. And, well, off the bat, it feels like a 5 Series, really. It feels quite agile. It feels like the steering has got a nice amount of weight to it, but we've got a very comfortable suspension setup too. Again, the BMW engineers say that finding that balance between driving dynamics and overall comfort is one of the main factors when creating a new 5 Series. And when you think about it, it really is a car that has to deliver on so many different fronts. It's why the tyres have got some special foam in to make the overall experience quieter, because as we've seen in previous videos, electric cars have to be even more tightly screwed together in order for any of those niggly sounds not to come to the fore, because they simply don't have any of those residual vibrations from an engine masking them. But this car is quiet. We've got some special sounds when we accelerate, so as you pick it up, you get some of those typical BMW noises that do add a little bit of theatre to the acceleration. Now, we haven't got any official performance figures, but with 335 brake horsepower, you can imagine it still feels reasonably nippy, and there is a more powerful M version for those who want a slightly more eager response from the throttle. One cool function of this i5 that is, well, I find it quite exciting at least, it's a development of the level 2 autonomous function that we've seen in many cars, but it takes things one step further. So what it can do is, while you're on the motorway, it can set your speed, so you select which speed you want it to do. You can then take your hands off the steering wheel. You can use the indicator to allow it to change lanes, but most importantly, and this is the newest function to the i5 that we've not seen on any car, you can actually look to your left or your right, and the car will see where you've been looking and change direction. It gives you a prompt, so it asks you if you do want to do that. It's not just going to fly over there willy-nilly. But it's a really cool function. It means you get hands-off driving and you're able to just change lanes by turning your head. It's a remarkable new system, and it does work very well. Now, it's currently getting approval in Germany, and I guess once it's approved in Germany, things tend to get approved in the UK, but we'll have to wait and see. However, it's a function that could really take a lot of the backache out of longer journeys, and at the end of the day, longer journeys have always been the 5 Series forte. It's another cool expansion on some of the technology that we've come to expect in BMW cars. Again, this car rides on air, so we've got the ability to change up how firm or soft we want the ride. I've currently got it in its most comfortable setting, particularly in this area of France that we're in at the moment. The road quality is very good, so funnily enough, the car feels very comfortable. Now, of course, with many electric cars, there's some additional weight that comes through the battery, and you can feel a slight sense of this over the imperfections in the road. It just feels slightly heavier than you might expect a traditional saloon to do, but it does feel remarkably well contained. And the biggest aspect of the car that you notice is simply how quiet it is in here. There's not too many of those audible imperfections entering the cabin. You can cycle through a variety of different driver modes. Sport, again, as you'd expect, adds plenty of weight to the steering, but actually in standard setup, I quite like the amount of weight that this car has. It's not overly heavy, which I find to feel a little bit distracting. Again, I think the focus here is maintaining that ride comfort, and it is actually shining through on this car. Despite this road starting to get a little bit choppy, the car has managed to stabilise itself quite nicely, and I think that's going to make those longer journeys just a little bit more comfortable. Again, with such a decent amount of range, I think that this will be a good choice for drivers who travel longer distances and want a little bit more of that long distance ability from their next electric car. There's also quite a nice function whereby if the car senses that it's getting too low on charge, you can actually select a different mode and it will boost the range, but it will just dial back the performance slightly. So if you know that there's a charger really close by but you are losing range thick and fast, you can select that function and it boosts your range so that you're going to get there with a little bit more to spare than you otherwise might do. Again, I've got everything pretty much camoed up in here, including the rear windows, but as far as forward visibility goes, these pillars are nice and thin, so actually my view out of the front is good. The seating position, as with most BMWs, is pretty much spot on too. I can get it nice and low, and I feel like I've got plenty of adjustability in terms of the steering wheel and the seating position itself. Around these bends, the car feels pretty neutral. And again, because you've got that instant torque, you've got plenty of support when you want to power out from the other side of the corner. It feels, I know it sounds pretty obvious, but it feels like a BMW really, and that's testament to what they're trying to develop into these new electric cars, because they need to transfer the kind of feeling that you expect from a combustion engine BMW into an electric one. And in terms of placement, in terms of importance, BMW is going to see this new i5 as its main 5 Series, so we're seeing quite an interesting change in terms of the lineup, because whereas previously you would have expected the 520D to be the gold standard of 5 Series, it's the 5 Series that people have always gone for, it's going to be the new i5 which takes that spot. BMW hasn't confirmed to me which engines it'll be taking when this car arrives on UK roads, but definitely it sees the i5 as its new core model. That's quite a big change really, because the 5 Series has always been the go-getter for business drivers, but also families too want a reliable and comfortable way of getting about. But it seems the electric change is very much at the forefront of this new 5 Series. It's worth mentioning, of course, that you will still be able to get the 5 Series with traditional petrol and diesel engines. It's just that this i5 is being seen as, well, something of the flagship of the range and the one that they want people to focus on the most. So how does it feel compared to an old 5 Series? Well, a previous generation 5 Series. I still don't think as the previous generation 5 Series as particularly old, but it feels very pleasant through the bends. And again, even though they're saying that these cars aren't 100% sorted, it feels like you could be driving this as a fully production car. Again, it's that compromise between the stability of the car through the corners, but it's not too sharp. It doesn't feel too bristly, as we've found with many electric cars. I think it's finding a nice little medium ground between that sporty support and also the comfort that you want from a 5 Series. I think actually this, as a touring, which thankfully is going to be created, could be quite a good all-rounder setup, really. It's not too firm, it's not too soft either. You could say it's a bit of a Goldilocks suspension setup for me. So now we're going down a slightly quicker bit, and you can tell that BMW have tried to put a slightly sportier edge that was always present in the 5 Series into this i5. Again, you can tell that the car is fighting its own weight slightly, so you can see that when you're coming down this road, there's a slight bob to it as you go through those corners and you get those undulations, but it's certainly not the worst that I've experienced in terms of electric cars. It just feels quite nicely proportioned in terms of the way it deals with those bumps. You're not getting those big shock waves that send you offline, which can happen from time to time, so even though you're hitting these undulations, it's not sending the car askew, which is really important. And as you're going through these bends, it's not feeling like it's going to wash too much. Again, driving dynamics are core and front and center for BMW. Would you consider them to be top of your priority when you're looking at this car, or would you be thinking about the range or the interior equipment first and foremost, or even just the specifications you can get it in? Maybe let us know in the comments section below. So in summary, really, this initial drive just makes me feel quite positive about the outcome of the fully production ready one. It's certainly in keeping with what you might expect from a regular 5 Series, albeit with an electric powertrain which feels quite accomplished and quite usable, really. I think that certainly it's not going to be restricted just to EV drivers who want to just drive around town. This is going to feel quite comfortable and easy on the motorway and at higher speeds. And a decent amount of range and a decent rate of charge means that you are getting plenty from that battery power too. Most importantly, it still feels intuitive to drive. It doesn't feel alien. It feels like a BMW car that happens to have an electric powertrain, which is exactly what you want, really. Of course, we can't tell what the styling is going to be like today, but I can imagine, and I'm sure you can imagine, pretty much what it's going to be like. And you combine all that and you've got an electric car that does feel far more ready for the mainstream than many others. Of course, you've got to leave a little bit of margin for these prototype cars, and you've got to leave a little bit of your ideas in waiting for when this car does arrive on the public roads. But certainly I feel pretty confident about the way this car drives just from this initial prototype test. I think mostly it's down to the dynamics that this car offers. It feels like a BMW first and foremost, and then as an electric vehicle second, which means that it still feels great to drive, it's still comfortable and refined, but it's got that important electric powertrain which feels core to what this car offers. One thing I will say is that I'm very excited to see what this car is going to be like when it reaches the UK's roads. Thank you for watching this Motors.co.uk prototype drive of the upcoming BMW i5. Now, if you have enjoyed this review, please leave us a like below and let us know what you think of this prototype vehicle. Are you excited about the i5 arriving in dealerships? And since you're here, please remember to subscribe to the Motors.co.uk YouTube channel and hit that bell icon so you're notified every time we upload a new review.